A shiver drifts across Dathomir's red haze as twilight surrenders to deeper gloom. Here, beneath a blood-tinged sky, twisted roots and gnarled wood reach skyward like bony fingers. An eternal mist coils through the forest floor, hiding shapes that watch the world in silence. This is the realm of the Nightsisters, force-bent witches, whose power rises with every breath drawn in that amber gloom. Long before any traveler dared tread these swamps, tales of dark enchantments and bone-etched altars unfurled across distant stars. Whispers spoke of women who commanded the unseen currents of life, summoning spirits and reshaping flesh. Their origins lay shrouded in memory, lost to time's deep waters. Yet on nights when moons cast silver webs across the mist, the hidden lights of their clan flicker to life in hidden clearings. Our tale begins with a solitary figure emerging from that veiled world. Cloaked in charcoal robes, a young acolyte named Silri drifts between sentinel trees, each step guided by incantations murmured beneath her breath. Her slender hands cradle a carved bone talisman, an heirloom passed down by sisters long vanished. Each glyph carved into its surface pulses faintly, a heartbeat echoing the cadence of a forgotten song. Silri pauses before a circle of standing stones, their surfaces scratched with crimson runes. Here, the air vibrates with latent energy. She kneels and closes her eyes, letting the mist swirl around her like living silk. Fingers trace the talisman's contours as her lips part in a whispered invocation. I call upon the shadow and the spirit. Reveal your secrets to my sight. A distant echo answers, footsteps that never fall, whispers woven from the dead leaves. Crystals set into the stone pillars glow one by one, casting an unearthly light that dances on Silri's pale skin. She inhales sharply, feeling a surge of power ripple through her limbs, as though the land itself has bent to acknowledge her plea. In that moment, fragments of memories coalesce, visions of a matriarchal circle older than any recorded chronicle, of women sculpting magical conduits from moonlight, of sacrifices offered beneath twin moons to bind life and death in harmonious dread. Yet these revelations slip away as quickly as they arrive, leaving Silri with a single gift, a heavy silence that presses against her chest, filled with the promise of potential and the warning of hidden cost. Unseen by mortal eyes, shapes begin to form in the gloom beyond the circle. 6 elders materialize, sorceresses draped in embroidered shawls, their faces painted with bone-white markings. Eyes gleam like obsidian pools. Each carries an artifact, ebony staves carved with serpent motifs, chalices that drip emerald ichor, and lanterns containing restless essences. They stand as living echoes of an unbroken lineage. Silri bows deeply, mind racing with reverent dread. The eldest steps forward, her voice a rasping caress. Child of mist and marrow, you seek the path of the clan, but heed this truth. Power is a river that demands tributaries of blood and will. Are you prepared to pay the price? Her tone offers no mercy, yet no cruelty either. Silri's heart thunders, but her voice emerges clear. I offer my heart. I offer my fear. I will learn your mysteries. A slow nod passes among the elders. They raise their staves and begin a chorus of low tones, resonating like distant thunder. The mists swirl faster, rising around Silri's knees, then waist, then shoulders. Within their folds, she glimpses phantoms, her future trials, cauldrons full of shadow, battles fought in silent forests, and the delicate weaving of life into unlife. As the final chant falls silent, the stones dim and the figures fade back into the surrounding veil. Silri's talisman warms against her palm. She stands alone once more, changed. The forest yawns behind her, inviting yet foreboding. Every rustle of leaf and every droplet sliding from moss seems to carry new significance. The path ahead winds deeper into that living mist, where knowledge and peril lie entwined. She rises to depart, resolve hardening in her gaze. The Nightsisters of Dathomir have welcomed a new seeker. In the dark hush of that enchanted grove, a covenant has been sealed, a promise that Silri will walk roads paved with power and peril, where the dance of life and death is spun by whispered sorcery. In the distance, moons glow like molten silver, and the red mists swirl, carrying word of her oath into every hollow. The forest listens, the stones remember, and the Nightsister legacy continues to weave its hidden threads through the ancient world. Silri's initiation had opened her senses to Dathomir's pulse. Now, stepping beyond that moonlit grove, she walked into an ecosystem unlike any in the known galaxy. A realm where every living thing seemed soaked in a crimson hue, and shadows clung like living silk. Underfoot, the swamps wept a blood-tinted ooze. Roots knotted over hidden pools that exuded a metallic tang, staining Silri's boots with a burnished patina. These waters were lethal to the unprepared, harboring spores that whispered seductions in the force, coaxing even the strongest wills toward corruption. Yet, the Nightsisters thrived here. They drew power from the land's raw essence, weaving its dark currents into their incantations. In the distance, obsidian cliffs rose jagged and sheer, their surfaces glinting with veins of iridescent mineral. Silri paused at their base, her gaze tracing ancient glyphs carved by hands long vanished. Each symbol hummed with residual energy, a testament to the witches who long ago bound themselves to this land. From these heights, thunder rumbled, a natural drumbeat that echoed Dathomir's status as a dark side nexus. Above, the sky churned in violent swirls of red and charcoal. Lightning forked through roiling clouds, its violet arcs crackling like the breath of distant spirits. With every storm, the Nightsisters gathered on high plateaus to harvest storm-forged energy, actors in an eternal ballet of creation and destruction. Silri felt the electric hum tighten her veins, and she raised her talisman, channeling the storm's potency into her own budding abilities. Dense groves of thorn-laden trees ringed the cliffs, their spines dripping sap that glowed faintly green. Silri brushed a thorn aside, releasing a plume of bioluminescent spores. Inhaling deeply, she sensed how even these plants responded to the force, their spores carrying memories of battles, of sorceries woven in moonlit rites, of the bloodbreaker pacts between witches and warrior spirits. Farther along the rocky shore, Silri discovered an ancient stone altar half submerged in a peat bog. Moss coiled over its surface, and dried blood dripped from its carved recesses. Here, the Great Mothers once commanded ceremonies binding their coven to Dathomir's heartbeat. Striking the altar's surface with a knuckle, Silri felt a pale warmth ripple through her palm, an echo of those primordial oaths. As she ventured on, the fauna came into view. Spectral herder wolves, their fur a living shadow, patrolled the borders of the swamp. Their eyes gleamed with uncanny intelligence as they passed beyond Silri's sight without breaking stride. Above, enormous bats swooped between gnarled canopies, their wing beats whispering half-heard lullabies. These creatures were drawn to the same dark currents that fueled the witches, binding predator and practitioner in a symbiotic dance. Silri's path led to a sunken grove where thorny vines wreathed a circular clearing. Within, dozens of witches knelt, their voices weaving a dirge-like chant. From the mist, a column of red smoke spiraled skyward, carrying fragments of the incantation into the storm. Silri joined the circle, her voice melding with theirs as she released the land's power back into the ether. The ground quaked, sending ripples through the swamp's edges. For a moment, the world seemed poised between life and unlife, every element drawn into the Coven's nexus. Moments later, the ritual ended. The witches rose as one, their forms radiating new strength. Silri felt a surge, an affirmation that the environment and the clan were inseparable. Dathomir was more than a stage for their dark rites. It was a living partner, its very soil a crucible where Nightsister magic could be honed to razor's edge. As she stepped away from the grove, Silri reflected on the precarious balance. The land gave, but it also demanded. Dathomir's gifts came at a price measured in blood, ambition, and the willing surrender to shadows. Yet without that surrender, the witches would lose their cunning, their power dissolving like mist before the dawn. Emerging from the mists toward a winding path flanked by obsidian monoliths, Silri carried the lessons of Dathomir close to her heart. The red-black world would shape her just as she would shape it. With each breath of the swamp's fetid air, she felt both humbled and invincible, a hallmark of the Nightsister Covenant. Ahead lay deeper mysteries, hidden altars, ancient spirit gateways, and the promise of forgotten magics. Each step would bind her more tightly to this land, a world where the nights came alive with power, and every shadow harbored a new revelation. And so, Silri pressed forward, the blood-stained earth beneath her and the obsidian heights above, guiding her journey into the heart of Dathomir's dark embrace. Silri's boots sank into loamy soil as she followed a narrow path toward a hidden hollow where the Nightsisters gathered. The forest canopy overhead twisted into spiderweb patterns, filtering moonlight into silver filaments that danced on damp earth. In the center of the hollow, a ring of standing stones rose like silent sentinels, their faces carved with ancient runes that pulsed faintly, a heartbeat echoing the unseen currents of the Force. Here the witches practiced a form of magic neither Sith nor Jedi could claim. As Silri emerged into the clearing, she saw Mother Talzin at its center, arms outstretched. Her fingertips wept viscous green ichor, droplets falling into a shallow basin of obsidian glass. Each drop ignited sparks of energy that rippled outward, stirring spectral shapes that coalesced among the stones. Wisps of ethereal forms, spirits bound by oath and song, swirled in spirals before dissipating into the night. Talzin's voice rose, a low chant weaving through syllables unknown to standard Jedi texts. "We do not seek domination," she intoned, "nor do we worship destruction. We are daughters of the dark side, but not its slaves." The words held a curious resonance, neither callous nor pious, but fiercely independent. Around her, the curl of tendrils of luminescent mist seemed to respond, gathering like living smoke. Silri watched as each witch approached the basin in turn. They knelt and let the ichor drip from their fingers, channeling it through their veins. With each ritual uptake, their eyes glowed, emerald beacons that pierced the gloom. Far from the Sith's hunger for conquest or the Jedi's pursuit of balance, this magic sprang from symbiosis. Witches drawing on the life-death cycle of Dathomir itself. Their philosophy held that the Force was a tapestry of many threads, and they alone could weave its fraying ends into new patterns. A young acolyte named Irissa knelt beside Silri, offering a wrist for the ritual. Silri felt the ichor's warmth as it passed inward, sending a prickling surge through her veins. The world sharpened. The bones of the standing stones rang like chimes, and she felt the spirit's gentle tug at her mind, beckoning towards secrets older than any star map. She inhaled the forest's damp scent, tasting earth and decay, and understood that power here required devotion to both creation and dissolution. Once the ritual completed, the witches rose together, chanting in unison, their voices layered into a harmonic resonance that vibrated through Silri's core. She sensed the dark side not as a monolithic void, but as a living river, its currents both nurturing and destructive. Through this communion, the Nightsisters shaped chances for healing and hexes alike. They could mend broken bones or unleash plagues upon intruders. Their magic was neutrality incarnate, wielded with intention and respect for its toll. Mother Talzin's gaze found Silri's. "Remember," she whispered, "the Force is neither light nor shadow. It is the space between. We are the midwives of its true power." Then, with a subtle gesture, Talzin released a wave of green energy that swept across the clearing, cleansing the ancients' rituals before drawing them back into slumber. When the circle broke, Silri felt the hush settle again, tempered by new understanding. She followed Talzin's path to an altar carved from petrified roots. Here lay a book bound in dark leather, its cover etched with the same runes she had seen on the trees. With reverent fingers, Silri opened it and traced lines of script describing Nightsister precepts: unity with the land's darker currents, ritual pacts with ancestral spirits, and the art of forging magic from dusk's final call. Unlike Sith teachings, loud with promises of power, or Jedi tomes, solemn with mandates of restraint, this law felt alive. The sisters recorded failures as frank lessons, not taboos. They spoke of mistakes that summoned curses beyond their control, and triumphs that blossomed like black flowers in moonlight. Each passage was a testament to their conviction that magic required both reverence and risk. As the night deepened, Silri rose from the altar's shadow. Around her, the other witches drifted back into hidden groves or climbed tree-spine staircases into darkness. The ritual circle faded from view, reclaimed by dripping vines and whispering mist. Silri tucked the leather-bound tome beneath her cloak and stepped onto the path leading home, forever changed by this glimpse of the Nightsister's heart. In the distance, the obsidian cliffs loomed like silent judges, and the swamp's crimson mist curled across their bases. Silri sensed the forest's sentience, its quiet approval of her initiation into the Coven's magics. She walked in the hush between chants and spells, carrying new knowledge that would guide her steps. The Darkside's daughters had shown her the power of neutrality and the price it exacted. As she disappeared into the forest's embrace, the spirits of Dathomir whispered after her, carrying her promise into the night. The world of red and black held its breath. The witch's legacy continued, writ in ichor and incantation, in the living ledger of a force beyond light and shadow. A chill wind rattled the bone-white branches above as Silri approached the grand pavilion carved from living roots and obsidian stone. Lanterns of phosphorescent fungus cast an unearthly glow on a circle of weathered trunks. At its center stood Clan Mother Talzin, towering, regal and unyielding. Talzin's skin was streaked in stark bone-white patterns, the pigment etched meticulously across her cheekbones and forehead. Her hair, woven with raven-black tendrils, cascaded to her waist. She raised arms encrusted with rings of carved bone, guiding swirling vapors from a massive iron cauldron that sat upon a dais of charred roots. Within the cauldron, a violet smoke writhed like living serpents, each curl responding to her silent command. "Mist weavers," Talzin's voice echoed, soft yet resonant. "Hear my plea." Her words wove through the clearing, stirring every hidden spirit. Our world must stand alone, unbound by alien edict. At her feet, the swamp's crimson waters stilled, as though gravity itself bowed in homage. Silri watched the scene unfold. This was no mere ritual. It was a proclamation. Talzin's vision had shaped the Night Sister way, to preserve Dathomir's sovereignty against all who dared encroach, be they Republic envoys or Sith lords. Under Talzin's guidance, the witches had forged alliances with darkness itself, yet never relinquished their autonomy. Once, Talzin had been a wanderer beyond the border mists, drawn back by an ancestral calling. Legend said she communed with the first spirits bound by Dathomir's ancient matriarchs. From that communion, she emerged transformed, no longer a seeker, but a sovereign. She challenged the old hierarchy, weaving a new order where power flowed equally through every coven member, united under her steady hand. Clan mothers, once 9, had pledged fealty to Talzin when her influence eclipsed theirs. On that sacred night, each laid her bones at Talzin's feet, forging a single, unbreakable matriarchy. Talzin's rule was tempered by mercy and magnified by ruthlessness when needed. Under her banner, the Nightsisters had repelled incursions from nearby star systems, their dark sorcery a shield against stormtrooper legions and Jedi purges alike. Her vision extended beyond mere defense. Talzin sought to transform Dathomir into a power center, its witches ambassadors of arcane commerce, exporting rare spellcraft in exchange for kyber fragments and clandestine secrets. She brokered silent pacts with smugglers who ferried cloaked shipments through hidden passes. Her network spanned beyond Dathomir's mists. Whispers of her power reached Coruscant's slums and Imperial archives alike. Yet it was Talzin's encounter with Count Dooku that solidified her legend. Under a moonless sky, she met the Sith Lord at an altar hewn from bone. Their alliance was born of mutual need. Talzin required protection from the Republic's ever-advancing forces. Dooku sought the Nightsisters' necromancy for his own designs. The bargain was sealed in ichor and oath, granting the Coven influence in wider galactic conflicts without ever ceding dominion over Dathomir. Above the cauldron's writhing mists, Talzin's gaze flicked towards Silri. "Child," she intoned, "remember this. Freedom demands sacrifice. Strength requires unity. We yield to none." The assembled witches inclined their heads, voices rising in a low drone, an affirmation that echoed through every root and vine. With a deliberate motion, Talzin plunged her hands into the cauldron. The smoke flared, scorching violet light illuminating her painted features. Images flickered within the vapor. Starships crashing into storm-tossed seas, distant worlds swallowed by crimson clouds, and a singular figure standing triumphant. Talzin herself, riding a tide of spectral warriors. When the vision retreated, the Coven fell silent. Talzin withdrew her hands, the ichor dripping back into the basin. She stepped down, robes trailing like a shadowed tide, and walked among her sisters. Each witch received a whispered blessing, a token of power to shape her destiny in service of the clan mother's design. As Silri followed Talzin through winding corridors of living wood, she felt the full weight of her leader's ambition. Not a hint of arrogance marred Talzin's stride. Instead, an unwavering certainty that Dathomir belonged to its own. Every plan, every incantation served that purpose. At the pavilion's edge, Talzin paused, turning toward a distant vista of glowing obsidian peaks. She raised a single finger to her lips, a gesture of secrecy and promise. "Soon," she whispered, "the galaxy will hear our song anew." Silri nodded, understanding that this was more than prophecy. It was a call to arms. Under Clan Mother Talzin's iron-woven vision, the Nightsisters would shape their fate. And Dathomir, the red-black jewel in their crown, would never stand alone again. A distant storm rumbled across the swamp, and Talzin vanished into the mist as silently as she had appeared. Silri remained, ready to carry forth the Covenant's fire, a disciple of the witch who dared defy the stars. A hush fell over the hidden grotto as Mother Talzin entered, her footsteps stirring the pale mist. Lanterns of glowing fungus traced spirals on the walls, painting strange shadows. At the chamber's center stood Talzin before a basin of iron, its surface roiled with violet smoke. Tonight, she met a visitor whose name alone sent ripples through Coven lore. From darkness emerged a figure draped in ebony robes, his presence chilling the air. Only the curve of his mouth and a low, deliberate breath were visible. "Mother Talzin," he intoned, voice silken with menace. "I seek your aid." Talzin's bone-white markings gleamed under the lanterns. In her hand, she gripped a carved wand of moonwood. "Speak your terms, Sith," she replied. Her tone was calm, but her eyes flared with ancient resolve. He produced a single red kyber shard, its facets pulsing faint hunger. "This gift secures your independence. In exchange, you will bind a rogue apprentice, one who defies my will. Your power for my promise." He paused, the chamber's air tightening around the bargain. "Aid me, and no imperial order will touch your swamp." Talzin regarded the shard as though weighing her coven's future. Freedom from the Republic's reach meant unchecked growth for her witches. Yet, the Sith's hunger for control lurked beneath every word. She inhaled, tasting damp earth and decay, then nodded. "I accept." A cruel smile curved his lips. "Excellent. I will return when the ritual is complete." With that, he slipped back into the shadows, leaving only the echo of his promise. Talzin placed the kyber beside her cauldron, then raised her arms. She wove runes in the air, each gesture summoning spectral energies. Phosphorescent spores swirled, ignited by her command, as she bound spirits and flesh into a living net. Her sisters joined, circling the basin in a convergence of power and intent. Within hours, Talzin had captured a wayward shade, an echo of a Force adept who had fled the Sith's grasp. The captive hovered in a cage of green flame, its form flickering between life and death. Talzin felt triumph surge, imagining the Sith's awe at her mastery. When Sidious returned, he materialized in a shaft of darkness, masks of swirling smoke. He observed the bound spirit with cold amusement. "Impressive," he said, "but insufficient." He waved a hand. The flame died. The captive dissolved, shrieking into nothingness. Talzin's heart knotted. The Sith had twisted the ritual, demanding an offering beyond her strength. "You betrayed our pact," she spat, staff trembling. He stepped into the lantern light, robes flowing like living ink. "I asked for devotion, not obedience. Your ambition blinds you." The kukri at his waist gleamed, a promise of violence. "Prove your worth, or suffer alone." A roar of wind slammed through the grotto as Talzin struggled to reclaim her power. She summoned a vortex of bone shards, hurling them toward him. He sealed it with a flick of the Force, shards scattering harmlessly. Her spirit flickered, like fire caught in a storm, pain flashing across her face. Sidious reached out, breaking her staff with effortless force. The bone-white fragments clattered to the floor. "Choose," he whispered. "Allegiance or oblivion." Talzin's lungs burned, but her resolve hardened. She drew upon the swamp's deepest currents, channeling its wrath into a final surge. Green lightning arced from her fingertips, striking his chest. Sidious staggered, robes smoking, but he did not fall. With a dark chuckle, he vanished into thin air. The storm subsided, leaving Talzin alone amid splintered bones and shattered clay. Her coven, apprentices and elders, cowered at the grotto's edge, their eyes wide with dread. Talzin knelt before the ruined altar, breathing deeply. The Kyber shard lay buried in ash, its promise broken. She had bargained for power and found betrayal instead. In that silent chamber, her spirit flickered like a dying lantern. Outside, Dathomir's mists curled through the crippled sanctum, as though mourning the coven's fractured fate. Talzin rose, staffless but unbroken. She would reclaim her authority, but the path ahead was soaked in tragedy. The Warlock's bargain had cost her more than she had imagined, and Dathomir would remember. The morning mist clung to Dathomir's blood-soaked bogs, as Clan Mother Talzin summoned her most daring apprentices. In a hidden cavern beneath the obsidian cliffs, a vast pit gaped like a wound in the world, its walls slick with ichor and runic scars. This was the crucible where the Nightsisters would craft their greatest weapons of vengeance, two brothers born of shadow and wrath. First came Savage Opress. His body lay unconscious atop a stone slab, limbs twisted by prior battles. Around him, witches chanted in a low, trance-driven rhythm, weaving threads of dark magic through his veins. Silri watched as Talzin dipped a carved bone dagger into a bowl of glowing ichor, then punctured Savage's brow. The fluid seeped into his skull, fusing Sith alchemy with Nightsister sorcery. Savage's chest heaved and his eyes flared gold. Muscles rippled beneath his ebony skin, transforming frail flesh into a whirlwind of strength. His jaw clenched, veins pulsed with a green-tinged power. When he finally rose, towering and fierce, he surveyed the cavern with Predator's awareness, an unbreakable instrument of the Coven's will. Across the pit, a second ritual unfolded, one far older and darker. Maul's body, shattered and discarded long ago, lay in fragments. Talzin's voice rose, echoing off damp stone as witches placed bone-chipped shards into a spiked coffin. Incantations braided across the council's ancient tongue, stitching broken shards of essence back into a single form. A tremor shook the ground as the coffin's lid snapped shut. Light leaked through the cracks, pulsing red, then green, then crimson once more. With a final, ear-splitting crack, the lid burst open. Maul stumbled out, eyes burning with murderous clarity. His horns gleamed, and red-black facial tattoos seemed to dance with life. Yet beneath that rebirth lay a hollow core, ravenous madness honed by centuries of silence. Savage knelt beside his resurrected brother, kneecaps cracking under his weight. In that moment, two beasts, one sculpted by dark science, the other bound by ancient sorcery, stood as living testaments to the Coven's ambition. Their bond was forged in blood and ritual, yet each bore unique purpose. Savage to serve as unstoppable fury, Maul to stalk shadows with cunning vengeance. Talzin addressed the pair, her voice carrying the authority of millennia. "You are the claws and teeth of our revenge. Carry forth Dathomir's wrath and carve fear into every heart that threatens our sovereignty." The witches echoed her oath, hands raised to lend their power. Over the weeks that followed, the brothers trained beneath the cliff's overhangs. Savage's dual axe cleaved through stone pillars as Sister Kyla channeled spells to temper his ferocity. Nearby, Maul practiced stealth ambushes, disappearing into darkness only to strike with twin sabers that cleaved obsidian effortlessly. Their strength seemed limitless, imbued by the living land itself. When their training concluded, Talzin led them to the swamp's edge. There, she summoned visions of distant targets, Imperial outposts, Republic supply convoys, and traitorous warlords who dared plunder Dathomir's mist-choked riches. Each assassination had to be swift, precise, and untraceable. Their first mission targeted a mining colony on a neighboring world. Under cover of night, Savage stormed through power conduits, taking down guards with brutal efficiency. Maul slipped between shadows, severing comms and luring commanders into traps of vicious illusion. The Coven's reach extended beyond Dathomir's mists, their vengeance carved into the galactic web. Yet with each spectre of death unleashed, Maul's madness grew. Whispers of past betrayals echoed in his mind, fueling a cold fury that even Talzin's spells could not fully contain. Savage, too, wrestled with the beast within, only anchoring his humanity through towers of brutal training and nightly communion with the clan's spirits. Talzin watched from afar, aware that her creations edged toward autonomy. She had woven her magic into their marrow, but she could not control the unique spark each bore. In Maul's haunted eyes, she glimpsed a hunger that mirrored her own, and in Savage's relentless drive, the raw will to survive beyond any covenant. One twilight, as the brothers prepared for a midnight raid, Savage turned to Talzin. "What lies beyond service?" he rumbled. "I am bound to your will, yet I feel destiny calling." Talzin's expression remained unreadable. "Our path shapes yours, as yours shapes our future. Embrace your purpose, yet remember you were born for more than blades." Maul watched in silence, twin sabers glowing red at his side. In that moment, the Coven's greatest gamble took form. Two warlocks, sculpted from history's shadows, wielding power neither Sith nor Jedi could match. Their loyalty was earned in blood rites and Swamp's heart, yet their ambitions, like talons, could one day rend the very Coven that forged them. As the night deepened, the brothers strode into shadow, leaving Dathomir's red-black world behind. Their legend had begun, two sons of Dathomir, bearing the Nightsisters' promise of vengeance across the stars. And in the silent mists, Talzin watched them go, mindful that every creation bore the seeds of its own undoing. As Talzin's crafted sons strode into the mists, another chapter of Dathomir's dark song unfolded, one written in iron collars and broken hopes. Beyond the Nightsisters' cauldrons lived the Nightbrothers, male warriors born into servitude, bound by oath and sorcery to their witch mistresses. Silri stepped through a ring of torchlight to a training ground carved into red clay. Rows of collared figures moved in unison, their shackles clinking in a rhythm that matched distant drums. Each Nightbrother held a curved blade, faces lined with resignation. Overhead, silent witches watched from wooden platforms, their expressions carved in stone-cold judgment. These men bore tattoos of exile, spiral symbols etched into shoulder and chest, marking them as property of the Coven. Their collars, forged from blackened iron and bound by Talzin's own magic, linked them to the witch's will. A single thought from a Night Sister could wrench control, turning human flesh into weapon and force. Silri observed one young Nightbrother, his blade strokes stiff but determined. He moved with the discipline of a soldier, yet lacked the spark of choice in his eyes. When he paused, sweat dripped down his temples, and his shackled hands trembled. A witch above flicked her wrist, and he flinched, resuming his drills with renewed vigor, obedience forced by arcane chains. This twisted hierarchy served two purposes: power and balance. The Coven harnessed brute strength without spoil of emotion, while preserving their own safety. Nightbrothers guarded ancient temples, patrolled the swamp's borders, and waged war against incursions, all without question. In return, they received sustenance and shelter beneath Dathomir's blood-red canopy. But, more precious than food, they craved freedom, a yearning as forbidden as it was unattainable. Silri approached the young warrior at day's end. "I am Silri, acolyte of the Coven," she said softly, kneeling to remove the smaller collar from her own wrist. "Who are you?" He bowed, voice rough with disuse. "I am Thrawn, son of Dathomir, servant of the Sisters." His eyes flickered with a spark of defiance, quickly smothered by habit. "I serve so our world may endure." Silri's heart clenched. "Have you ever asked why you serve?" Thrall's blade clattered as he sheathed it. "Questions cost pain. I remember only that the Coven saved me from exile. I train, so Dathomir remains our home." Behind his words lay a silent plea for dignity. Silri slipped her fingers beneath the rusted clasp of Thrall's collar. It pulsed with a low hum, a heartbeat of magic woven into iron. "Perhaps one day," she murmured, "you will find strength to break its song." Before Thrall could speak, a horn sounded. Two sisters emerged to inspect the Nightbrothers' progress. Their presence quelled any hope. The warriors knelt immediately. Silri stepped back, resentment and sympathy warring within her. The hierarchy was cruel, yet cunning, a mirror to the Coven's own precarious rule. As dusk fell, Thrall led Silri to a hidden cave, where discarded collars lay in tarnished heaps. Each iron ring whispered stories of lives shackled. Silri held one, noting the tiny runes that bound spirit to steel. "Is this your curse?" she asked softly. Thrall's jaw tightened. Part blessing, part prison. Without it, the swamp would drown us in madness. The Coven controls the power we cannot master. His gaze pierced the darkness. Yet it is not just control, it is fear. Silri considered this, feeling the damp stone press against her fingers. In Talzin's rise, the Coven had needed the Nightbrothers as living monuments of authority. But that same need built a foundation of resentment, a brittle alliance destined to crack under strain. She returned the collar, placing it gently on the pile. Power without trust is a house of cards. The Coven's strength may yet fall if its pillars refuse to stand.
Thrall bowed. "Your words carry danger. Speak them wisely." He melted back into the shadows, leaving Silri alone amid the discarded fetters.
Under the moon's wan glow, she navigated back through the swamp, mind alive with questions. The Nightbrothers' curse was woven into Dathomir's destiny, a reminder that absolute power exacted absolute control. But Silri sensed a fault line. Within that very control lay the seed of rebellion. Ahead, distant fires flickered, an omen that the Nightbrothers' bond would soon be tested. The Coven's equilibrium, balanced on collars and fear, teetered at the brink. And as whispers of unrest crept through the mists, Silri understood that Dathomir's fate depended on more than magic alone. Change was coming, and it would reshape the Coven from within its blood-stained heart. Night had settled over Dathomir like a velvet shroud, the red mist curling through skeletal trees. Silri followed the spectral glow of lantern fungi to a hidden glade where the Coven practiced their deepest sorceries. The Nightbrothers' clang of exercise faded behind her, replaced by the pounding rhythm of tribal drums echoing against stone. At the center stood a dais carved from petrified roots, stained dark as spilled ichor. Around it, witches formed a circle, cloaks billowing in the damp breeze. Each held a dagger tipped with emerald-hued crystal. Beneath their feet, the ground was etched with blood sigils, intricate spirals and interlocking lines drawn in the life essence of ancient sacrifices. Silri stepped forward, feeling the air thicken with potent energy. Talzin's voice, low and resonant, led the chant. By bone and blood, by spirit bound, we call the fallen from hallowed ground. With each phrase, the sigils pulsed, casting rippling shadows that danced across the witches' bone-painted visages. The first corpse lay prostrate at the dais's edge, a Nightbrother whose loyalty had waned too far. Sisters gathered, gripping his wrists and ankles. Talzin strode to the altar, raising her arms so their sleeves revealed runic tattoos blazing with green fire. She dipped her fingers into a chalice of crimson liquid, a fusion of blood from Coven elders, and flicked droplets onto the fallen warrior's chest. Wherever the droplets landed, veins glowed with emerald light, a testament to the Coven's dominion over life and death. Silri watched breathless as the witches intoned the final stanza. The drums reached a thunderous crescendo, then stopped abruptly. Silence fell so heavy it pressed against her eardrums. Slowly, the Nightbrother's chest heaved. His eyes snapped open, glowing orbs of living jade, filled with a blank, obedient focus. He rose unsteadily, face devoid of fear. His first command was a curt nod to Talzin, a living monument to the Coven's arcane mastery. Before Silri could blink, another form lay at the dais's opposite side, a sister who had perished in a failed gambit against an imperial patrol. Talzin's expression softened as she approached, running a finger along the sister's wound. With a quiet invocation, the witch wove threads of spirit back into the body. The sister's lips twitched, and she inhaled sharply, eyes flickering to life. Pain crossed her features briefly, then subsided as Talzin placed a lantern fungus behind her ear. The glowing lantern pulsed, synchronizing with the newly awakened heartbeat. Each resurrection carried a price. As Silri sensed the siblings of life rejoining existence, a toll resonated in her chest, a reminder that power demanded sacrifice. The Coven whispered that their strength came from the void between worlds, where spirit and blood met. To command that void, they had to relinquish parts of themselves, tethering their souls to Dathomir's darkest corners. Talzin stepped back, watching the newly risen warriors and witches find stamina. The restored sister bowed, lanterns glow in time with her breathing. The Night Brother cracked his neck, flexing newly infused sinew. Both were silent tribute to the Coven's authority. Silri crossed the clearing to a circle of younger acolytes, each practicing minor rites, extracting candlelight from sap, binding wisps of mist into temporary forms, and whispering names of the dead to test their connection. Their eyes shone with wonder and trepidation, aware they stood on the precipice of knowledge few could fathom. Nearby, Sister Nissa summoned a spirit bound to Dathomir's oldest oak. The spirit rose, translucent and swaying, fingers outstretched before dissolving into motes of green light. Nissa smiled, collecting the motes in a crystal vial. "Remember," she whispered to Silri, "there is no finality. Death is but a gateway. Will is the key." As the night waned, Talzin raised her arms once more, dismissing the drums of power. The resurrected knelt, witches lowered their hoods, and the glade exhaled. The sigils faded to ash, and the corpses, restored in both flesh and spirit, melded back into the Coven's ranks. Silri stepped into the clearing's center, fingers brushing the iron chill of a discarded collar. She recalled Draal's yearning for freedom and the Nightbrothers' servitude. Here lay the Coven's double-edged gift, dominion over mortality, but at the cost of absolute control. Talzin approached, her gaze steady. "You have seen how we shape life and bind death," she said. "Now you must learn when to wield such power and when to surrender it." Silri bowed, heart pounding with both reverence and caution. Under the pale red moon, she understood that the rite of blood and spirit was more than resurrection. It was the essence of the Nightsisters' covenant. Through these rituals, they claimed sovereignty over fate itself. As the glade returned to shadow, the resurrected departed in silence. The Coven's secrets swirled back into the swamp's breath, awaiting the next moonlit ceremony. Silri lingered a moment longer, tracing the faded sigils at her feet, before stepping into the mists, carrying a new understanding of life's fragile weave and the power to unravel it. The dawn broke harshly over Dathomir, its red haze shredded by columns of smoke and flame. Bells of alarm, black iron chimes, clanged through the swamp as the Republic's war machines descended. Twin gunships roared overhead, their engines scorching the murk, hunting for witches in their hidden hollows. Silri raced through tangled roots, heart hammering against her ribs. The ritual circle's glow had barely faded when blaster fire erupted among the pines. Shadows danced on dripping bark, punctured by crimson bolts. A half-chant died on her lips as she saw witches struck mid-incantation, bones cracking, spirits flickering away in silent screams. Above the chaos, General Grievous's flagship hovered like a talon poised to crush. His metallic form, a twisted echo of life, strode across a floating platform. 4 lightsabers, spun in practiced malice, whirled through the air, rending robes and severing wards. Each fallen witch unleashed a flicker of green mist, dissipating against the gunship's heat. Burning embers raced through the canopy, igniting the mist like wildfire. Swamps boiled, birthing hissing steam that choked the living. Silri heard the swamp's lament, a guttural wail beneath the Republic's bombardment. She pressed against a charred trunk, inhaling singed air, steeling herself to run deeper into Dathomir's tangled heart. But the massacre spared no sanctuary. Grievous's droids, sleek and merciless, swept through the undergrowth, Their red photoreceptors glowed as they cut through protective wards. Anywhere smoke thinned, blasters found hidden covens. A sister's echoing cry faded in the cracked bark. Another faded into the bog's fetid waters. Talzin emerged amid the inferno, her bone-white tattoos stark against soot. She stood on a rocky crag, arms raised defiantly as vines writhed to form a living barrier. Blaster bolts struck the barrier, shattering it into splinters of green light. Grievous advanced, his voice synthesizer crackling. "Your magic is powerless." Talzin's eyes blazed. She summoned a final torrent of energy, sending ripples of corded force through the gunship's hulls. Engines sputtered, blasters misfired. For a breath, the assault halted, as if the swamp itself had thrown them back. Witches dashed forward, spirits blooming in spectral waves, pressing the advantage. Then, Grievous unleashed a weapon of his own. A gravity mine detonated at Talzin's feet. The explosive tore a crater into the crag, torrents of stone and mud spraying skyward. The clan mother's form blurred in the blast's smoke. When the dust settled, Talzin was gone, her presence erased like ink in the rain. Silri saw the green mist coalesce where Talzin had vanished, then collapse into nothingness. Reverent horror clenched her chest. Without their matriarch, the Coven's heart was ripped out, sisterhood fractured. Droid battalions pressed the advantage. Nightbrothers, freed from their collars, fought desperately but fell in droves. Silri caught a glimpse of Draal's fierce charge against the mechanical legions, his roar swallowed by the blast's echo. Then he, too, fell beneath a hail of blaster fire. As the sun climbed overhead, Dathomir's native darkness was replaced by scorching daylight. Fires raged uncontrolled, turning mist to noxious steam. The forest's green glow dimmed, sacrificing its life to extinguish the flames. Silri stumbled through ash and splintered roots, every breath laced with loss. In the massacre's wake, only pockets of resistance remained. Coven acolytes huddled in clefts, nursing burns and broken magics. The swamp's song was silenced, replaced by the mechanical drone of Republic troops. Blaster bolts carved crimson scars across every tree trunk. Silri reached the old altar of bones, where Talzin had first claimed her power. She knelt amid shattered idols and spilled ichor. Hands trembling, she traced a rune etched centuries ago, an oath of survival and vengeance. Though the Coven lay shattered, its legacy endured. In blood-stained earth, she vowed to keep the witch's spirit alive. Above the charred clearing, gunships receded into the pink sky, leaving behind a world forever changed. Dathomir's mist rolled over the scars, hiding them in an unending tide. But the swamp would remember. In its darkest depths, remnants of the Coven would gather again, harvesting sorrow into new sorceries. Silri rose. Blood and ash splattered on her robes. The massacre had claimed her sisters and warped her world. Yet an ember of resistance flickered within. Dathomir's witches would rise once more, guided by shadows and fueled by grief. And in time, the swamp would sing again, with power reclaimed. As she disappeared into the haze, Dathomir wept. Its tears of mist, a promise that the Nightsisters' song was not yet silenced. Moonlight filtered through ragged clouds as Silri crept among crumbling pillars of a ruined temple. Charred beams and fractured stones lay half-buried in peat, their contours softened by creeping moss. Here, once the Coven's heart, where chance had woven storms and summoned spirits, now only echoes remained. Each step stirred pale mist that rose like ghostly fingers. Silri paused, sensing currents of the Force ripple through the air. It was as though countless voices whispered across the veil, blending sorrow with defiance. She closed her eyes, reaching beyond sight to touch the lingering echoes of her fallen sisters. Among the ruins, slender shapes drifted, emerald phantoms born of ancient rites. Their forms flickered in and out of view, a sister's silhouette kneeling in remembrance, a pair of Nightbrothers standing guard in silent vigil. These apparitions bore no threat. Instead, they offered quiet counsel. Silri felt them brush her mind with reassurance, urging her onward. At the temple's core stood a shattered altar, its stone basin cracked and empty. Silri knelt beside it, fingers tracing faded runes that once bound life and death. She whispered a fragment of the Coven's dirge, an invocation of unity, and a surge of green luminescence pulsed from the runes. From the urns of ash at her feet, a soft chorus arose, as though the temple itself lamented the loss. A spirit gathered before her, the translucent visage of Sister Nissa, eyes closed in eternal meditation. Nissa's lips moved soundlessly, conveying guidance without speech. Silri bowed her head, committing the memory to her soul. Each spirit she encountered reinforced the truth that the Nightsisters had become something more than flesh and bone. Their essence persisted in this place, bound by devotion to Dathomir's mysteries. Beyond the altar, a narrow passage led to a cavern lit by bioluminescent vines. Their soft emerald glow revealed ancient murals depicting the Coven's origin, women dancing beneath 3 moons, forging pacts with primordial entities. As Silri passed, the vines pulsed gently, as though acknowledging her presence. Here, the line between past and present shimmered, allowing whispers of ancestors to brush against her consciousness. At the cavern's end, she discovered a hidden spring. Its waters glowed faintly under moonbeams, and spectral fish wove through currents like living starfields. Silri knelt and scooped water into her palm. The liquid felt cool and alive, carrying memories of every enchantment ever cast here. She drank, the water's spirit melding with her own, strengthening her will to carry on the Coven's legacy. Footsteps echoed behind her, soft, cautious. Silri stood, igniting her awareness. From the shadows emerged Mira, a surviving acolyte whose faith had never faltered. Grey streaks marred her once vibrant robes, but her eyes shone with newfound purpose. Without words, Mira reached out. Silri took her hand, forging a bond of shared memory and renewed hope. Together, they made their way back through the temple's bones. The phantoms drifted at their sides, guiding them as though shepherding wayward sheep. In the open courtyard, broken relics glinted in the starlight. Bone-carved masks, shattered daggers, lanterns whose fungal lights had long since dimmed. Silri gathered a handful of moss and scattered it across the stones, offering small seeds of rebirth. As the mist thickened, a hush fell, broken only by distant croaks of swamp creatures. Silri raised her voice in a final chant, low and steady, summoning the Coven's spirits to one last gathering. The air quivered, and dozens of green lights flickered into being, the gathered ghosts of witches, warlocks, and Nightbrothers alike. They formed a ring around Silri and Mira, their luminous forms bowing in solemn tribute. In that circle, Silri felt the Coven's indomitable will. Despite steel collars and burning blades, despite betrayal and blood-soaked earth, their essence endured. The Force itself bore witness, its currents strengthened by this sacred communion. A whisper rose, a promise that the Coven's song would not fade into silence. As dawn threatened the horizon with pale light, The phantoms dispersed, returning to hidden thickets and secret alcoves. Silri and Mira remained at the altar's edge, carrying renewed purpose. The temple's ruins were no longer a tomb, but a cradle for rebirth. With one last look at the haunted stones, Silri stepped forward. Each footprint dissolved into mist, erasing the trace of her passage so that future seekers might find only memory and magic. Above, 3 moons dipped below the tree line, their pale faces reflecting the unbroken covenant between the Nightsisters and Dathomir. In the quiet aftermath, the fog began to settle, and life stirred once more beneath the swamp's canopy. The ghosts had not vanished. They had transformed, woven into every leaf, every drop of ichor, and every breath of mist. And though the Coven's citadel lay in ruin, its spirit walked on in those who remembered, forging a path toward tomorrow's dawn. The ruins of Dathomir slumbered beneath silver mist. But in the silence, something ancient stirred, not in the roots of trees or bones of the earth, but above. The stars, distant and cold, held secrets older than any whispered spell. And some among the Nightsisters had always looked skyward, not inward, for their true beginnings. In the depths of the black hollow, where sunlight never touched, and the air hummed with stillness, a hidden chamber had remained sealed for centuries. Time had forgotten it, yet the symbols on its stone threshold still glowed faintly, pulsing with green ichor when touched by a sensitive hand. Mira, her spirit still raw from the rituals of the night before, stood at its entrance now, led by dreams and the murmurs of the dead. Inside, star maps sprawled across walls of obsidian, each line cut with unearthly precision, each constellation a tale. Some mirrored familiar galactic charts, the core worlds, the outer rim, even wild space. But interwoven through them were stranger geometries, constellations that didn't belong to any known galaxy, spiraling across dimensions as if the stars themselves once spoke in tongues. One symbol reappeared again and again, a hand of 5 stars encircling a 6th, bound in a ring of fire. Mira's fingers hovered over it, feeling a pulse beneath the stone, a rhythm like a heartbeat. She whispered the Nightsisters' ancestral invocation. The chamber answered. A central pedestal stirred, sliding open to reveal a tome bound in hide, older than any Dathomiri tongue. Its pages shimmered with script that shifted like mist, refusing to be read by the unworthy. As Mira turned the pages, the glow of the glyphs reflected in her wide eyes. These were not mere records of the past, but visions of origin, a record of another time, another place, perhaps another world. Above ground, the sky darkened unnaturally as storm clouds gathered without thunder. In the wind, the voices of long-dead sisters wove through the leaves, speaking of a place called Peridia, of pathways between stars, known only to those who listened through the Force. A gate beyond space, guarded not by stone or spell, but by sacrifice. One vision struck Mira like lightning. A woman, faceless yet familiar, stood upon a cliff not of Dathomir, but somewhere else. Her arms raised not in incantation, but in farewell. Behind her, starships blazed across the sky, heading into the unknown, fleeing or returning. This was not legend. This was migration. The witches of Dathomir, it whispered, had come from somewhere beyond the known galaxy. They were not merely born of swamp and blood. but seeded from starlight, cast out from a greater conclave long ago, before the Sith had formed their creed, before the Jedi lifted their first blade. Back in the hollow, the stone maps shifted, stars rearranging themselves under unseen hands. Mira fell to her knees, overwhelmed by truths her mind barely grasped. Yet through the storm within, a message emerged. The Nightsisters were but one flame in a greater constellation of power. Their extinction on Dathomir had not ended the legacy. It had scattered it. Some fragments remained hidden in the wilds of the galaxy, artifacts buried in dead moons, sigils etched on derelict stations, and whispers carried by those who could not forget. Others had fled through time itself, re-emerging when fate permitted, drawn by instinct back to the great calling beyond. Mira rose, cradling the ancient tome to her chest. Around her, the chamber dimmed once more, the glowing runes fading into dormancy. The hollow would not open again for a long while, not until another seeker heard the stars' song. Outside, the mist had cleared. Dathomir's night sky glittered with 1,000 watchful eyes. One star, faint and red, pulsed irregularly near the galactic edge. It was no longer just a star to Mira, but a beacon, a reminder that their story extended past charred earth and broken bones. The Force stirred with ancient memory. The sisters had risen and fallen, but not vanished. Somewhere in the dark beyond hyperspace, they waited. Not dead, not forgotten, only sleeping. And in the silence between galaxies, the stars whispered still. From the haunted groves of Dathomir, where fog once danced with the dead, the tale unwinds through shadow and void. Across the stars, farther than Navi computers dare trace, and deeper than memory dares reach, lies a place outside time, a second womb, a second grave. A world whispered only in dying breaths and maddened visions. Peridia. There, in a realm without starlight, the galaxy forgets itself. Peridia is not merely a planet. It is exile crystallized. It drifts beyond the boundaries of the known galaxy, cloaked in cosmic silence, caught in the whirl of a storm-born sky. A place that ancient navidroids recorded, only to lose again. A place charted by no Jedi, no Republic. A world erased by distance and folded into myth. The stars above Peridia do not shine. They swirl, slowly, coldly, around a cyclonic eye of void, as if gravity itself mourns. No sun warms the land. The winds howl not with air, but with pressure shifts of ancient vacuums. The world is cloaked in pale greys and blackened rust, its terrain broken and hollow, riddled with clefts where nothing ever lived. Floating above those riven cliffs, suspended not by physics but will, looms a temple. Cracked, eternal, built from stone that remembers pain. Its monoliths defy geometry. They lean inward and outward at once, as though rejecting the physical laws of any galaxy. This was no place made for mortals. Inside the temple, time moves oddly. Flames flicker in reverse. Reflections linger after the source has gone. At its core, a dais hovers above a fracture in the stone, where pale blue mist seeps endlessly from below, like breath from a sleeping god. And etched into every surface, glyphs older than galactic civilization, spiraling into patterns meant to be intuited, not read. This was where the exiled coven fled, or were sent. The force here is not light nor dark, it is other, thick, heavy, like walking through memory. Here, Magic takes form without chant or gesture. The laws of will become law itself. Long before Talzin's line or Dathomir's mists, the witches of Peridia had already begun shaping matter with intention alone. But exile comes with consequence. Peridia, for all its lingering majesty, is barren. No prey, no predator, no seasons to measure time. The world sleeps in stagnation, and the sisters who remained, those who became the great mothers, learned patience beyond lifetimes. Their power deepened, but so too did their stillness. Motion became ritual, language became tone, names faded, and in their place, archetypes endured. Mother, weaver, seer. They waited, watching the stars turn from a place no starlight reached, watching the spiral of galaxies grow distant, then unfamiliar. Their link to Dathomir, a thread frayed and snapped. Their bodies withered, but their spirits endured. Each sister became a vessel for ancestral voices, a chorus carried through flesh barely holding form. Their faces were bone-painted, not by choice, but by the bleaching of years uncounted. Their robes bore sigils that pulsed with memory, not fabric. They became conduits, not merely women. They were time, held still. And then something stirred the silence. A pulse in the void, a calling. A ship, foreign, familiar, pierced the ancient sky, trailing fire like a comet. It echoed with the Force, but not the soft flow known to the Jedi. This was raw and red, unharnessed, wounded. The Great Mothers stirred. Their chants resumed after an age of silence, not in greeting, but in preparation. For the galaxy they had left behind had remembered them, and it would soon remember why they were cast out. The temple's inner stones began to hum. Symbols blinked to life one by one, as if in response to a long-promised signal. From exile came vision. From silence, design. The witches had waited in the dark. And now, the tide had shifted. The veil between galaxies was thinning. Peridia was waking. And as it did, the Great Mothers would not return as seekers. They would return as judges. They came not with banners, nor blasters, nor boast. The galaxy barely noticed their return. No grand fleets heralded their arrival. No Jedi foresaw their rise. Yet, in the chill corners of the Force, in the trembling breath between dreams and death, something ancient stirred, and the galaxy shivered. The Great Mothers, entombed in patience for millennia upon Peridia, no longer slept. Their presence bled back into the galactic consciousness like ink in water, slow, certain, uncontainable. It began with whispers in the outer rim, odd transmissions caught in static, ships disappearing in starless reaches, ghost signals echoing across long-dead frequencies. Explorers chasing hyperspace anomalies encountered ruins carved with unfamiliar glyphs, structures too old to be charted, pulsing faintly with unnatural life. Holograms found buried beneath moons flickered to life at mere proximity to the Force, revealing visages of matriarchs long dead, or perhaps never truly gone. Their faces, half veiled in shadow, bore expressions of serene dominion. Their voices did not speak. They resonated, humming in one's bones rather than ears. The messages were not pleas, nor threats. They were declarations, prophecies etched in layered language only the Force sensitive could interpret. And the message was simple. The mothers are waiting, and they remember. In secret corners of the Imperial remnant, some began to listen, dark adepts, remnants of cults, seekers of forgotten paths, each drawn not by power, but by purpose. The Sith sought domination, the Jedi sought harmony. The Nightsisters, especially those who survived, sought balance through will. The Great Mothers, however, were something older. They did not seek at all. They were. Thrones carved from the fossilized remains of extinct leviathans rose once more within the floating temples of Peridia. Each throne bore symbols burned not by fire, but by thought. Inscriptions that curled and shifted as one stared, mirroring the heart of the observer. And on each throne, a figure emerged from the shadows. Mother Actropor, with eyes like dried obsidian, unblinking and still. Mother Clothau, whose fingertips danced with crimson filaments of fate. Mother Lexis, draped in robes that shimmered like oil and memory. None moved quickly. None spoke above a whisper. And yet even a Sith Lord would tremble before their gaze. Their awakening was not loud, for the power they drew upon needed no spectacle. Their return echoed across the Force itself, a seismic ripple felt not in stars, but in spirit. Jedi meditated and found their minds pulled into alien visions, starless skies, green flames, and bone-laced hands reaching across the void. Even the world of Mortis, lost to most and legend to all, flickered in brief resonance, as if recognizing kin. The mothers did not forget the betrayal of Sidious, the burning of Dathomir, the extinction of their kin. But vengeance was not their goal. Their will was colder, deeper, ancient beyond ambition. The galaxy, once rid of their influence, had grown brittle, soft, unbalanced. Now it was time to correct the wound. Their first gesture was not war. It was alignment. Dark adepts drawn to Peridea were not recruited. They were absorbed, bound by ritual. Their names dissolved, their identities rewritten by the tide of ancestral will. They became vessels, voices for the endless coven. Holocrons corrupted by Sith hands sparked erratically, reacting as if in warning. Jedi texts burned from within, pages dissolving into ash mid-recitation. All signs pointed to a shift in the very current of the Force. But the galaxy, still fractured from civil wars and imperial collapse, could not see the pattern yet. Only a few suspected. Those who had seen Dathomir fall. Those who felt the fog of forgotten magics rising from graves untouched by time. A tremor in the spiritual foundation was building. The ancients had awakened, not to reclaim a throne lost, but to reshape the order that rose in its absence. And in the quiet between systems, the Force whispered a name it had not spoken in lifetimes. The Echo Route, the place of beginning, the path home, the reason for exile. The galaxy had grown unfamiliar, but the Great Mothers remembered what came before the stars.
They would return not as guests,
but as architects of a forgotten truth. The return of the Great Mothers was not a beginning, it was a reckoning, the conclusion of a cycle spun long before hyperspace lanes were drawn, or galactic maps carved in steel. To understand the true nature of their power, one must follow it back through veils of myth and shadow, to the very event that cast them into the void beyond the stars. Before Dathomir, before Peridia, before exile, in the time before time, when the Force pulsed raw and undivided through the cosmos, there existed no Jedi, no Sith, no codes or councils. There were only seekers, scattered peoples on scattered worlds, awakening to the call of the unseen current that flowed through all things. The Great Mothers, or rather, what they once were, stood among the first of these. Not warriors, not zealots, but weavers. Mystics who shaped the Force not through domination or submission, but through alignment. They called it thread weaving, a discipline both art and instinct. Through it, they guided life, death, and fate itself. They saw the Force not as light or dark, but as a tapestry, one in which their role was to mend, alter, or sometimes sever the threads of destiny. Where others sought absolutes, they embraced contradiction, birth and decay, healing and destruction, mercy and vengeance.
This philosophy drew attention and fear.
Among the first galactic orders to rise from Force sensitives were those who would become the Jedi. They formed from a desire to bring order to chaos, to temper power with principle. But they could not abide the Great Mother's unorthodox approach. What the Jedi called balance, the Mothers called control. What the Jedi deemed sacrilege, they understood as necessity. Tensions grew. Secret councils were convened, and from them emerged the decree that would fracture the ancient Force tradition forever. The Weavers were to be severed from the cosmic fold. The betrayal did not come in battle, but in ritual. A convergence was called under pretense of unity, a gathering of the galaxy's oldest Force traditions. The Weavers arrived in trust, bearing tomes etched with sigils of peace and offering seeds of harmony. But the moment their feet touched sacred ground, the rite was reversed. The temples twisted, the skies bled crimson, and the Force itself recoiled. Sigils were torn from their tomes and branded as blasphemy. Their names were struck from records, their lineages condemned. Those who could flee did so. Others were consumed, mind, body, and spirit, by the backlash of a broken pact. The survivors, led by a triumvirate of the strongest matriarchs, turned to the stars. Guided by instinct and by fate, they followed a tear in the galactic weave, a path not charted, but felt. At its end, they found Peridea, a barren, brutal world on the edge of the known and the unknown. It was a prison, but it was also refuge. There, amid ancient ruins not built by their hand, the exiles carved a new identity. Their pain became ritual, their banishment a legacy. The Force on Peridia was colder, older, more volatile, but it recognized them, and in its depths they found allies, not beings of flesh, but remnants of a time before even them. Spirits, echoes, the first whispers of the Thread Mother. Through suffering, they were remade. The Force, as the Jedi and Sith knew it, moved in linear fashion. Light and dark, rise and fall. But the Great Mothers no longer moved along those lines. They wove beneath them, around them. They waited, not in stasis, but in preparation. Their blood, once diluted and scattered, thickened anew through generations of silence. What was once a fracture had become a new loom entirely. The galaxy had forgotten the true crime, that it was not darkness the Great Mothers embodied, but complexity. That they were not banished for evil, but for ambiguity, for refusing to choose between the extremes that the others worshipped. And now, that ambiguity returned, not to ask for forgiveness, but to reclaim what was theirs before the lie of balance was ever spoken.
They were not the fallen?
They were the forgotten thread. The story of the Great Mother's exile might have ended in silence, lost to the frayed edges of the galaxy. But silence is a womb, and from within that void, something ancient stirred anew. Peridia, once thought a grave, proved instead to be a crucible. Here, far from the jealous reach of Jedi or Sith, Dathomiri magic was not only preserved, it evolved. The cold stones of Peridia bore no memory of the exiles who first arrived, hollow-eyed and wearied from betrayal. But the world itself remembered something older, forgotten forces that whispered through ley lines and hummed beneath obsidian peaks. And as the Great Mothers adapted, they listened. At the heart of their new dominion, deep within a canyon scorched black by time and tide, they carved out a temple, the cradle. Unlike the natural sanctuaries of Dathomir's swamps, the cradle was a construct of defiance. Green flame burned in fountains not of water, but of raw ichor drawn from the planet's marrow. Its pillars were formed from the fused bones of extinct leviathans, levitating in perfect alignment, not suspended by machinery, but by sheer will. Within this cathedral of bone and magic, the Great Mothers abandoned what little of the old ways still chained them. Freed from the ethics of the lost galaxy, they embraced what had once been forbidden, even among their kind. Not out of cruelty, but from necessity. Power had cast them out. Power would return them. Their magic deepened, not as the Jedi or Sith defined strength, but in breadth. They learned to split their spirits into echoes, to walk outside their bodies and cast judgment across stars. They learned to animate fleshless husks, not merely as puppets, but as vessels for ancient intelligences once locked in stone. They learned to bind thought and memory into crystal, creating libraries that spoke in screams and whispers, in truths unspoken by time. One ritual, known only as the womb of cinder, allowed the mothers to sacrifice a fragment of their soul to fuel a spell of permanence. These rituals left them altered, eyes darker, veins illuminated with threads of green, but stronger, enduring. Their lifespan stretched, tethered more to will than to flesh. Pain became a conduit. Death, a door. The greatest change, however, came not in the rituals themselves, but in the foundation beneath them. On Dathomir, magic was a harmony between the planet and the witches, a balancing act of nature and force. But Peridea demanded obedience. The world resisted. It tested, and those who could not match its pulse were consumed. This struggle forced a kind of evolution. Their chants grew harsher, their glyphs more abstract. The green ichor they summoned now hissed with unfamiliar potency, denser, more volatile, a reflection of the alien currents beneath Peridea's surface. The cradle became more than a temple. It became a forge. There, new kinds of incantations were born, blood tethers that could bind a target across light years, soul fires that could ignite even in vacuum, and the most secret of all, the threadwell, a convergence ritual capable of summoning all versions of a soul across timelines into one form, gaining their memories, power, and scars. The galaxy had moved on, forgetting the thread it had severed. But in this realm of green flame and silent bone, the exiled coven wove something monstrous and magnificent. A new strand in the Force's great weave, dark not because it was evil, but because it was unknown, unmapped, and unbound. The Great Mothers were no longer simply witches. They were architects of essence. They shaped the building blocks of destiny, not just for themselves, but for the galaxy that had rejected them. Each flame in the cradle was a memory, each hovering skeleton a promise. Peridia was no longer exile. It was origin.
And now, with their power fully matured, they would look again to the stars, not as outcasts, but as progenitors, not to reclaim what was taken,
but to remake it in their image. From the cradle's green flame and ancient bone rose not just a new order of magic, but its sovereigns. As the Great Mothers deepened their command of Peridia's essence, leadership passed from collective ritual to concentrated will. Thus emerged the triumvirate. 3 mothers whose strength, vision, and cunning surpassed all others. Clotho, Actropar, Laxis. Individually, each was a force of nature. Together, they formed the axis of a reborn coven. Their seat of power was not a throne in the traditional sense, but a sanctum of convergence. A cavernous chamber of black stone veined with pulsing green light. At its center, a vast, mirrored pool. The waters shimmered not with reflection, but with prophecy, memory, possibility. Around it, the 3 veiled figures stood in perfect formation, cloaked in the silence of judgment. When they spoke, their voices came as one, yet bore the unique timbre of each mind behind the veil. Clotho, the seer, stood always to the east of the pool, where the morning light of Peridia, faint though it was, first kissed the stone. Hers was the gift of foresight. Her whispers reached into the strands of time, not to predict, but to pluck and reshape. Her veil was laced with threads of crystal, and beneath it, her blind eyes gleamed like polished opal. It was said that she had torn her own vision from her skull in exchange for sight beyond the veil. To the west stood Actropar, the executioner. She wore a robe of interwoven sinew and ash-colored silk, her presence a blade honed to divine edge. While Clotho wove futures, Actropar severed the past. She dealt with action, not theory. Her magic bled through muscle and bone, power wielded like war. The corpses of challengers, lovers, and traitors alike formed the pillars of her personal archive. Each bone etched with runes, each soul bound for reference. Between them, ever at the northern arc of the pool, stood Lachesis, the binder, the quietest, yet perhaps the most dangerous. Where Clotho saw what could be, and Actropar enforced what must be, Lachesis understood what was. Her role was continuity, the weaving of thread to thread, past to future, thought to action, life to death. Her spells held the coven's memory in place, and its secrets in silence. Her veil shimmered faintly with iridescent ink, symbols shifting with every word she spoke. They said she could bind ideas into reality, make thoughts manifest, turn prophecy into law. Together, the triumvirate did not merely rule, they defined. Every edict, every vision, every ritual passed through their triune will. Disagreement was rare, though not absent. When it came, it was handled not through argument, but through the pool of concord. Each would cast a single drop of ichor into the mirrored waters, and the one whose drop sank last would forfeit her vision. Such disputes were few, but each had rippled across centuries. Their dynamic was not one of harmony, but balance. Clotho's ethereal certainty, tempered by Actropar's ruthless clarity, held together by Lachesis's ever-knotted tether. None sought to dominate the others, not out of sisterhood, but because all understood the truth. Power fragmented is power vulnerable. They had watched Dathomir burn because of pride. Peridia would not suffer the same fate. Many among the newer Coven members worshipped the triumvirate as avatars of the Force itself. Not light, not dark, but the third road. Others feared them as monsters who had traded too much humanity for eternity. The triumvirate welcomed both perceptions. They had no need for love or obedience, only order. And so, through the echoed chamber and beyond the mirrored pool, their voices resounded, 3 minds speaking with one breath. Their words crafted prophecy, their silences consequence. But even the triumvirate, for all their power, could not remain untouched by what stirred on the edge of stars. For somewhere, in the deep churn of space and fate, a new player moved. A piece not placed by Clotthow's sight, not marked by Actropau's blade, nor stitched by Laxus's threads. A threat, or a fulfillment. The pool shimmered, and the 3 watched. The pool still shimmered. In the aftermath of the triumvirate's silent vision, a truth began to emerge, not from within Peridia, but from the void beyond. It had begun as a whisper, felt first by Lachesis while scrying the boundary between realms. A tremor in the weave, a strand pulling taut across stars. The thread had not been broken by the fall of Dathomir. It had merely gone dormant. Long ago, when the Great Mothers were exiled from the known galaxy, the Nightsisters did not sever their connection to the old world. They buried it. Locked within forgotten maps, inscribed in stone and ichor, there existed a path. Ancient, unstable, but real. A bridge between Dathomir and Peridia, not made by hyperspace lanes or Republic charts, but by force-rich channels, what the Coven called the Veiled Way. In the deepest chambers of the Triumvirate's temple, beneath a vault sealed for centuries, rested the key, a star map carved into the bones of a long-dead Leviathan, its ribs curled like a cathedral. Across those white spines danced green symbols, Nightsister sigils that glowed softly when touched by magic. The chart pulsed now with unfamiliar light, awakened by movements far away. Someone or something had activated its twin. Elsewhere, in the galaxy, the Triumvirate had forsaken. That twin had been unearthed. Beneath Dathomir's ruined surface, in a tomb swallowed by time, explorers seeking power, or perhaps merely survival, had disturbed it. Their presence had sparked more than curiosity. It had reignited an old covenant. Clothow stood before the star map's echo, her fingers outstretched. The lights surged along the chart, forming a constellation never seen in Republic archives. A shape, not of the stars themselves, but of a corridor, folded space, compressed by will and ancient design. The bridge was no simple tunnel. It was a rite. It responded not to coordinates, but to belief, to blood. With each pulse, memories stirred. Lachesis recalled the original sealing of the bridge, the chants, the lives given, the worlds aligned. It had taken 3 generations of bloodline binding to ensure that none could simply stumble upon the veiled way. And yet now, through time and loss, the thread was vibrating, calling. Someone had found part of it. The Triumvirate did not speak aloud, but understanding passed among them. If the connection could be reopened, so too could their influence return. Not as whispers, not as remnants, but as presence, dominion. The galaxy that had forgotten them would remember. The Sisters of Dathomir were not extinct. They were returning home. Actropau, whose wrath had always simmered below the surface, clenched her clawed hand and pointed to a specific intersection on the star chart, a place where the old galaxy bled into the new. It marked a place of convergence, a world known to Jedi archives as Seatos, but to the ancient coven as the Anchor, a gateway stone lost to myth. It was there that the bridge could be reforged. But the ritual would not be simple. It would require more than spell or sacrifice. A vessel would be needed, a soul capable of anchoring both ends, one foot in death, one in life. Someone shaped by Dathomiri magic, yet unknown to the Great Mothers. Clotho sensed it already, a disturbance not born of resistance but possibility, a ripple that defied even her sight. Laxis traced the thread gently, murmuring words that hadn't been spoken in millennia. The light responded, blooming along the carvings, forming a silhouette. The shape of a woman cloaked in shadow, green fire flickering in her eyes. A future uncertain, yet undeniable. And far away, in the galaxy that once cast them out, winds stirred over Dathomir's grave. A voice whispered through fog. The bridge had begun to hum. The thread between worlds was pulling tight. The bridge was not yet complete, but already the stars had begun to shift. As the green lights of the veiled way faded into darkness within the temple, a new presence approached Peridea, not one born of magic, but of calculation. The still skies above the dead world trembled as an artificial anomaly tore through the void. The Eye of Sion, an immense ring of metal and silence, emerged from hyperspace with the grace of inevitability. Its arrival cracked the stasis of the exile world. Something foreign had come. The Great Mothers stood upon the black stone balcony of their citadel, gazing skyward. From afar, the vessel appeared almost ceremonial, a crown of steel drifting through eternity. But within it, precision moved like breath. He had arrived. Grand Admiral Thrawn, once thought lost to myth and time, stepped through the ancient courtyard gates, flanked by his night troopers, soldiers wrapped in decay and ritual alike, armor bearing the stains of survival and rebirth. Their march was neither fast nor aggressive. It was measured, like the Admiral himself. Each footfall echoed as if it had been predicted. The three waited. He did not kneel, nor did he speak first. Instead, Thrawn studied the triumvirate the way he studied battle maps. Eyes calculating, cool, absorbing every detail. Lachesis was the first to move, descending the stone steps like a whisper given form. She circled him once, her expression unreadable, her veil trailing the scent of ash and myrrh. "You are far from the domain of logic and fleet," she murmured. "Why have you come?" Thrawn inclined his head, not in reverence but in acknowledgement. "I come seeking restoration. You seek return. Our goals align." It was Actropor who let out a low, bitter chuckle. "And what would a tactician know of exile, Admiral?" "I know what it means to be forgotten," he replied simply, his voice calm but edged. "And I know how to make the galaxy remember." The statement hung in the air like a drawn blade. For a long moment, silence settled between the players on the board. Then Clotho stepped forward, the most inscrutable of the three. Her hand reached out, not to strike, but to sense. Green mist curled from her fingers, brushing against Thrawn's temples. She saw then what few could. A mind carved into discipline, layered in memory, guarded by grief and ambition. He was no mere soldier. He was a strategist cloaked in the skin of a commander, a man who saw patterns in every movement, every silence, and he believed wholly in what was to come. You have seen our realm, Clotho said softly, and yet you do not fear it.
I have no time for fear, Thrawn answered. Only preparation.
The pact was never spoken aloud, but it was sealed nonetheless, through shared need, through purpose. The Great Mothers offered their ancient arts, the reanimation of troopers lost in space and time, enchantments to mask movement, to bend path and probability. In return, Thrawn would be their vessel of return. His fleet, once ashes of the past, would rise again as a spear point to pierce the veil of the galaxy. The dead would march not as husks, but as omens. That night, the temple hummed with new resonance. Nightsister sigils were painted on ship hulls. Troopers chanted names long forbidden. And in the crypt chambers below, the green flames rose high, illuminating old coffins now empty. The Eye of Sion loomed above, ready to carry them back through the breach, through the anchor, through Dathomir. The coming of Thrawn was not invasion. It was resurrection. And the galaxy, in its complacent peace, had no idea what had been set in motion. Silence had never truly returned to Peridia. Even after Thrawn's arrival, after the pact had been silently inked between living mind and spectral will, the ground beneath the fortress trembled with something older, something rising. Where once the halls beneath the citadel lay dormant, sealed for centuries by magic and memory, they now pulsed with life, unnatural. Deep in the crypts, beneath monolithic arches carved in forgotten tongues, the sarcophagi of ancient warriors stirred. It began not with sound, but with sensation, a pressure in the chest, a chill along the spine, as though the air itself recoiled. Then the lids shifted. Stone grated against stone, and green light, faint at first, but growing, spilled from the cracks. The Great Mothers stood above the circle of rebirth, each swaying to the rhythm of an unheard chant. Their veils shimmered in the flickering emerald flame, their voices layered and low, summoning not just the dead, but obedience. These were not mere corpses. They were the fallen troopers who had followed Thrawn into exile, a legion lost to the annals of the known galaxy. Their bodies, once shattered by time and misfortune, had been recovered and preserved by the necrotic rites of the Dathomiri arts. Now, beneath the touch of the triumvirate, they were given new purpose. The Night Troopers. Ritual markings scorched their armor, symbols of binding, of servitude. Green ichor flowed through the cracks of their broken flesh, sealing joints, fueling movement. Their eyes, once dulled by death, now blazed faintly with unnatural resolve. And yet, they did not scream. They did not groan. They obeyed. Their steps were precise, their formations intact. As they rose, hundreds of them in unison, it was not as a horde of the mindless undead, but as soldiers resurrected for command. A dead legion retooled for conquest. Thrawn watched this grim miracle with no outward reaction. Only his clasped hands and narrowed gaze revealed thought. To him, this was no horror. It was efficiency. The Great Mothers had given him back a resource he thought lost. In their deathless ranks, he saw not only power, but symmetry. "Will they hold formation in battle?" he asked, his voice echoing softly through the ritual chamber. "They do not question, they do not fear," Laxis replied. "They will not retreat," added Actropol. "And they cannot die the same way twice," Clotho concluded, her smile thin beneath her veil. Thrawn nodded. "Then we will not waste them on mere skirmishes." Each sarcophagus that opened brought back another trooper, another piece of his former fleet. And more than that, These night troopers were bound to the magic of Peridia, tethered to the three. As long as the ritual circle remained unbroken, they would rise again. Even if struck down, even if torn apart on the battlefield, the Great Mothers could draw their spirits back into broken bodies and command them forward once more. Not just an army, a cycle. Outside, the Eye of Sion was being refitted. More stone carvings embedded into its structure, more sigils painted beneath its surface. It would serve as a bridge between galaxies and a vessel of deathless conquest. The first platoon of night troopers stepped into the pale light of Peridia's twilight, armor clicking in synchronized rhythm. They carried blasters like old relics, their uniforms threadbare, but marked anew by magical paint. From a distance, they looked like soldiers. From up close, they were something else entirely. Not alive, not dead, just waiting. And when they moved, it was not for glory, not for belief. It was because someone had willed them to. With the corpses of his old army stitched into magical servitude, Thrawn now possessed more than a fleet. He had an instrument of fear, an army that would not bleed, would not tire, would not mourn.
Soon, they would march from the edge of known space to the heart of the Republic.
And the galaxy would not understand what had arrived until it was too late.